Members of the escort committee will exit the chamber through the lobby doors.
Welcome in, everyone. They just announced the senators who will be leading Joe Biden into the chamber. They are stepping out to get Big Joe. I was watching the PBS NewsHour's lead up to this, and it was really interesting there. I mean, of course, they had a few people talking about what they thought President Biden would talk about. Of course, the Inflation Reduction Act. I think it was Lisa Desjardins who brought up just an interesting little fact that Democrats will be wearing pins that are crayons. And, you know, she was talking about the Democrats' focus on schools and education. But really what I thought that was a rebuttal to the congressman who was handing out AR-15 pins for Republican members of Congress to wear, which is just completely, it runs along the lines of the insanity of the Republican Party, right? But it's just so out of touch and so insensitive. And so I think the Democrats are very slyly, wearing these pins is kind of a big middle finger to those Republicans who decided to wear that.
Mr. Speaker, the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps.
Kamala Harris's husband. Tyree Nichols' family will be in attendance.
Mr. Speaker, the Chief Justice and Associate Justices of the Supreme Court.
That's tough, man. Brett Kavanaugh is tough to look at. Man, I don't know who these mics are close to, but they are cackling. I heard he was joking about how's Matt Gaetz doing. I don't know. Okay, yeah, so the mics were close to the Supreme Court. We could hear Kagan. Dr. Jill Biden. Looking stunning in that purple dress. Wow, that is beautiful. He kissed her right on the lips. Kissed her right on the lips. It's like, that's funny. Bono right in front of her. From U2.
Mr. Speaker, the President's Cabinet.
Blinken, Yellen, Garland. That's a diverse cabinet. Thanks, Elena. Thanks for joining the chat.
Good to see you. This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
No problem, but take us back to the floor.
Good evening and welcome to this special PBS NewsHour coverage of President Biden's State of the Union address. I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. In just a few moments, President Biden will be walking into a very different House chamber than from his speech a year ago. For the
All right,
first
we can
time,
listen to
we'll
these
be
guys, and then
addressing a
I'm gonna
divided Congress and a new Republican
grab
majority in the House that has already
the
launched
C-SPAN
several investigations and
video
hearings into
that
his
I've got.
administration's policies during his first 2 years.
You will see there the new House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, sitting next to Vice President Kamala Harris during the speech.
this up.
That is expected to draw sharp contrasts between the president's own agenda and Republican priorities.
There we go.
But President Biden will also try to
Flying around the
highlight
screen,
some
let's put this
areas
down
where
here.
he believes
All
both
right,
parties
this'll-
can work together.
This will let us look
Joining us here in
into
the
the
studio, watching alongside with us,
onto the floor.
Amy Walter, editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter, David Brooks, columnist for the New York Times, and Jonathan Capehart, associate editor of the Washington Post.
But let's go first to congressional correspondent Lisa Desjardins, who is inside the House chamber. And Lisa, we should explain to our audience that you are in the chamber in the press gallery above the House floor, just behind the rostrum where President Biden will be speaking. What are you seeing?
Yeah, that's right, Jeff. You know, this is certainly a crowd that has, the atmosphere here is very upbeat. I would not say it's electric. I think this is a Congress that is still determining its own identity. Is this a place where we are going to see bitter divide and anger, or is this a group that is going to be more collegial with each other? This speech is going to be part of that conversation. Tonight, we do see most Republicans on one side, most Democrats on the other. But so
Thanks,
far, a very
Joe.
upbeat mood in the crowd.
And there's the former House Speaker.
Yeah,
Nancy
I noticed that too.
Pelosi
What
alongside
Lisa
Senate
Desjardins
Warner.
just said. His entire
Yeah,
cabinet
we're watching
was
and keeping
very
an eye on the
upbeat.
House chamber there, and of course, we'll
Very
let you
happy
know
to be
as soon
there.
as we watch President
That's a
Biden
great sign for our
enter
country.
that room. In the meantime, we have our own White House correspondent, Laura Barone Lopez, who is also watching from Capitol Hill. She joins us now as well. Laura, we know you've been talking to your White House sources, getting a preview of what we expect to hear from President Biden tonight. Give us a sense of what we should hear.
That's right, Amna. So the White House officials I've been talking to say that President Biden is going to talk about finishing the job that he started when he took office 2 years ago. And he's going to focus heavily on the economy, trying to express some empathy, but also optimism about the road ahead. He's going to specifically refer to the 12 million jobs that he says have been created, that the recent analysis has been created since he took office in 2021. And he is also going to say, according to excerpts that we received from the White House not long
And Laura,
ago,
if we should
that
say, here
COVID.
is William McFarland, the House Sergeant at Arms, announcing President Biden's arrival.
Yeah, here he is. It's so weird that they cut away to the analysis like minutes before Biden was coming in. Let's see if they stay here.
And Laura, forgive me for stepping in there, but pick up where you left off, please.
That's right, Jeff. So the president is also going to say, according to excerpts, that COVID no longer controls our lives, and he's going to make a plea to Republicans about finishing the job that he started, saying that the midterms ultimately decided that they should work together, given that it resulted with a split Congress, with Democrats still controlling the Senate, Republicans taking control of the House, and he's going to say that there's no reason that he cannot work with this new Congress and that Republicans cannot work with him.
And Amy Walter, as President Biden sort of ticks through the laundry list of his objectively historic achievements, this is coming at a time when there is growing dissatisfaction in this country. There was a recent poll that found more than 6 in 10 Americans believe that President Biden hasn't done very much. How does the White House confront that? How do they change that narrative?
I mean, this is the
Matt
era
Sisling.
we're living in right now, one in which it's not just that the president is having a challenge in trying to speak to those folks who say that they're feeling bad about the direction of the country, but our country, partisans feel very differently about what the priorities should be. So sometimes we talk about, well, we need more bipartisanship, we need more compromise. But the reality is, when you look at the priorities that Americans say they think Congress and the president should work on. Very few priorities from Democrats are the same priorities as Republicans. In fact, the Pew poll that came out this week found there was just one of the top four for Republicans showed up on the top four
What was it?
for Democrats.
Is it
The
national
economy,
security?
not
Okay,
surprisingly.
economy, yeah.
But in 2019, there were zero overlaps. So this is, for the president, he can't fix that, right? That is part of this the system that is in place right now, where actually being a compromiser, doing unity, as the president will talk about tonight, it might sell in terms of making a speech, but in terms of selling it as a political strategy, it doesn't. It's not going to work as well.
Well, let's be real.
David
That's because
Donovan, I
one
know you're
side
both watching
is
and we're waiting to see
engaged
what
in
the president says
delusion
here. Bipartisanship
and
is a
fantasy
big
and conspiracy
part
theories.
of what we know he will
Like
be talking
I made a
about,
video
but
about them
also a lot of
floating
folks are
away like a
watching to see if
balloon.
This is sort of a
Like,
soft launch
we're all
for
down here
the
on Earth,
re-election campaign. David, what are you
and they're
watching
just
out for
floating
tonight?
around up in the clouds.
62% who think he
The
hasn't
Marjorie
done much,
Taylor
which Jeff
Greene
mentioned.
space
The
lasers,
administration believes
the
that they
Boebert
can
gun
sort of fix that.
fantasy,
A lot of the infrastructure spending that was passed last
the
year,
Fox
those
News
projects are actually gonna happen this
CRT
coming year.
trans.
And so expect to see
you know,
Joe Biden. If somebody's filling a pothole in front of your
fear-mongering.
Street, Joe Biden will be there.
He will
They'll
be there,
cutting the
shovel in
ribbon,
hand.
putting up the sign, Joe Biden did this for you. And so when he talks about what the campaign is going to be, he sounds like he's running for mayor. And so I think he'll be laying out, no, I really did do this, and here's the real result.
And we know he's hitting the road immediately after this to do exactly some of that.
I don't know.
What
I
are
don't
you
really
looking out for
agree with
tonight?
David Brooks here. I mean,
I'm looking for
Joe
the
Biden
president,
hasn't really
in
been
addition
out
to him
there,
laying out
you know,
all of
talking
the
about
accomplishments.
himself. He's been working.
I'm looking for tone. I'm looking for him to speak to the hearts of the American people, not just I fixed your roads and I fixed your bridges and I've done all these things, but I understand the pain and frustration that you have vis-a-vis the economy, but also I understand the fear that you have vis-a-vis law enforcement and the cops. We know that there are going to be, I think, 16 family members of people who have died at the hands of police. We know that Tyre Nichols' parents will be in the audience. So I'm looking forward to what the president might say with regard to not just directly to the Nichols family, but to all those families around the country, particularly African-American families for whom interaction with law enforcement is not usually a positive thing.
To the point about tone, we know the president's going to emphasize bipartisanship. There has been an internal debate among his advisors, I'm told, about how tough he should be on Republicans. As the president is about to take the microphone there, I guess we'll find out. Hold that thought.
I believe the president will first hand copies of his speech to both Speaker McCarthy and to Vice President Kamala Harris, as is tradition. They will hold on to copies of those speeches. That itself has made for some memorable moments.
That's
in the
right.
past.
And the House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, said he's not going to rip up the speech this year.
Because the speech is going to be based on truth and facts, man.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor to present to you the President of the United States.
Oh, Joe Ellen. Awesome. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you. You can smile. It's okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Please. Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, our First Lady and Second Gentleman, good to see you guys up there. Members of Congress.
Whoa. My goodness, PBS.
By the way, Chief Justice, I may need a
Snapping.
court order. She gets to go to the game tomorrow, next week. I have to stay home. Got to work something out here. Members of the Cabinet, leaders of our military, Chief Justice, Associate Justice,
I think
and
he's talking
retired
about the Super
Justice of
Bowl.
the Supreme Court, and to you, my fellow Americans. You know, I start tonight by congratulating the 118th Congress and the new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy.
Aww. Oh, man.
Speaker, I don't want to ruin your reputation, but I look forward to working with you. And I want to congratulate the new leader of the House Democrats, the first African-American minority leader in history, Hakeem Jeffries.
Yeah.
He won in spite of the fact I campaigned for him. Congratulations to the longest-serving leader in the history of the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell. Where are you, Mitch?
This is interesting. This is interesting. I like it. I like it. Hey, stand up, Mitch. What are you doing?
And congratulations to Chuck Schumer.
What a dick.
Another,
What a dick.
Another term as Senate Minority Leader. I think you, only this time you have a slightly bigger majority, Mr. Leader. You're the majority leader. About that much bigger? Yeah. Well, I tell you what. I want to give special recognition to someone who I think is going to be considered the greatest speaker in the history of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. Folks, the story of America is a story of progress and resilience, of always moving forward, of never, ever giving up. It's a story unique among all nations. We're the only country that has emerged from every crisis we've ever entered stronger than we got into it. Look, folks, that's what we're doing again. 2 years ago, the economy was reeling. I stand here tonight after we've created, with the help of many people in this room, 12 million new jobs, more jobs created in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years, because of you all, because of the American people. 2 years ago, and 2 years ago, COVID had shut down, our businesses were closed, our schools were robbed of so much, and today, COVID no longer controls our lives. And 2 years ago, democracy faced its greatest threat to the Civil War, and today, though bruised, our democracy remains unbowed and unbroken. As we gather here tonight, we're writing the next chapter in the great American story, a story of progress and resilience. When world leaders ask me to define America, and they do, believe it or not, I can define it in one word, and I mean this: possibilities. We don't think anything is beyond our capacity. Everything is a possibility. You know, we're often told that Democrats and Republicans can't work together. But over the past 2 years, we've proved the cynics and naysayers wrong. Yes, we disagreed plenty. And yes, there were times when Democrats went alone. But time and again, Democrats and Republicans came together to defend a stronger and safer Europe. It came together to pass once in a generation infrastructure law, building bridges connecting our nation and our people. We came together to pass the most significant law ever, helping victims exposed to toxic burn pits. And in fact, it was important.
And of course, Biden's son died of cancer when he got home from the war and was exposed to those same burn pits.
300 bipartisan pieces of legislation since becoming president. From reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, the Electoral Count Reform Act, the Respect for Marriage Act that protects the right to marry the person you love. And to my Republican friends, if we could work together the last Congress, there's no reason we can't work together and find consensus on important things in this Congress as well. I think folks, You all are as formed as I am, but I think the people sent us a clear message. Fighting for the sake of fighting, power for the sake of power, conflict for the sake of conflict gets us nowhere. That's always been my vision of our country, and I know it's many of yours. To restore the soul of this nation, to rebuild the backbone of America, America's middle class, and to unite the country. We've been sent here to finish the job, in my view. For decades, the middle class has been hollowed out in more than, and not no one administration, but for a long time. Too many good-paying manufacturing jobs move overseas. Factories closed down. Once thriving cities and towns that many of you represent became shadows of what they used to be. And along the way, something else we lost: pride, our sense of self-worth. I ran for president to fundamentally change things, to make sure our economy works for everyone, so we can all feel that pride in what we do. To build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down. Because when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up, and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well.
How is that like a partisan thing, Kevin McCarthy?
Quoting my dad, but my
You
dad
can't
used
clap
to
for
say,
that?
Joey,
Wow.
a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. He really would say this. It's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. Well, folks, so let's look at the results. We're not finished yet by any stretch of the imagination, but unemployment rate is at 3.4%, a 50-year low. A near record unemployment. Near record unemployment for Black and Hispanic workers. We've already created, your help, 800,000 good-paying manufacturing jobs, the fastest growth in 40 years. And where is it written? Where is it written that America can't lead the world in manufacturing? And I don't know where that's written. For too many decades, we imported projects and exported jobs. Now, thanks to what you've all done, we're exporting American products and creating American jobs. Folks, inflation has been a global problem because the pandemic disrupted our supply chains, and Putin's unfair and brutal war in Ukraine disrupted energy supplies as well as food supplies, blocking all that grain in Ukraine. But we're better positioned than any country on earth right now. But we have more to do. But here at home, inflation is coming down. Here at home, gas prices are down $1.50 from their peak. Food inflation is coming down, not fast enough, but coming down. Inflation has fallen every month for the last 6 months, while take-home pay has gone up. Additionally, over the last 2 years, a record 10 million Americans applied to start new businesses. 10 million. And by the way, every time someone starts a small business is an act of hope. And Madam Vice President, I want to thank you for leading that effort to ensure that small businesses have access to capital and the historic laws we enacted that are going to just come into being. Standing here last year, I shared with you a story of American genius and possibilities. Semiconductors, small computer chips the size of a fingerprint that power everything from cell phones to automobiles and so much more. These chips were invented in America. Let's get that straight. They were invented in America. We used to make 40% of the world's chips. In the last several decades, we lost our edge. We're down to only producing 10%. We all saw what happened during the pandemic when chip factories shut down overseas. Today's automobiles need 3,000 chips, each of those automobiles. But American automobiles couldn't make enough cars because there weren't enough chips. Car prices went up, people got laid off, so did everything from refrigerators to cell phones. We can never let that happen again. That's why we came together to pass the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act. Folks, I know I've been criticized for saying this, but I'm not changing my view. We're going to make sure the supply chain for America begins in America. The supply chain begins in America. We've already created 800,000 new manufacturing jobs without this law, before the law kicks in. With this new law, we're going to create hundreds of thousands of new jobs across the country. And I mean all across the country, throughout not just the coast, but through the middle of the country as well. That's going to come from companies that have announced more than $300 billion in investment in American manufacturing over the next few years. Outside of Columbus, Ohio, Intel is building semiconductor factories on 1,000 acres, literally a field of dreams. It's going to create 10,000 jobs, that one investment, 7,000 construction jobs, 3,000 jobs in those factories once they're finished. They call them factories. Jobs paying an average of $130,000 a year, and many do not require a college degree. Jobs. Because we work together, these jobs where people don't have to leave home to search for opportunity. And it's just getting started. Think about the new homes, the small businesses, the medium-sized businesses. So much more that's going to be needed to support those 3,000 permanent jobs and the factories that are going to be built. Talk to mayors and governors, Democrats and Republicans, and they'll tell you what this means for their communities. We're seeing these field of dreams transform to the heartland. But to maintain the strongest economy in the world, we need the best infrastructure in the world. And folks, as you all know, we used to be number one in the world in infrastructure.
Transportation Secretary.
13th in the world. The United States of America, 13th in the world in infrastructure, modern infrastructure. But now we're coming back because we came together and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, the largest investment in infrastructure since President Eisenhower's interstate highway system. And folks, already we've funded over 20,000 projects, including major airports from Boston to Atlanta to Portland. Projects that are going to put thousands of people to work rebuilding our highways, our bridges, our railroads, our tunnels, ports, airports, clean water, high-speed internet, all across America. Urban, rural, tribal. And folks, we're just getting started. We're just getting started. And I mean it sincerely. I want to thank my Republican friends who voted for the law, and my Republican friends who voted against it as well. But I still get asked to fund the projects in those districts as well. But don't worry. I promised I'd be a president for all Americans. We'll fund these projects. And I'll see you at the groundbreaking. Look, this law will further unite
Meaning
all
I'll come
America.
into your district.
Projects like Brent
Don't
Spence
care
Bridge in Kentucky
it's
over the Ohio
plus
River.
20
Built
Republican,
60 years
right?
ago. Badly needed repairs. One of the nation's most congested freight routes, carrying $2 billion worth of freight every single day across the Ohio River. And folks, I've been talking about fixing it for decades, but we're really finally going to get it done. Yes. I went there last month with Democrats and Republicans, and from both states, to deliver a commitment of $1.6 billion for this project. And while I was there, I met a young woman named Sarah, who's here tonight. I don't know where Sarah is. Is she up in the box? I don't know. Sarah, how are you? Well, Sarah, for 30 years.
I think that was who
for 30
shouted
years,
and got
I learned, she told me she'd been a proud member of the Iron Workers Local 44, known as the Cowboys in the Sky. The folks who built,
That's Joe's bread and butter, man.
built
Those
Cincinnati
union workers,
skyline.
those iron workers.
Sarah said she can't wait to be 10 stories above the Ohio River building that new bridge. God bless her. That's pride. And that's what we're also building. We're building back pride. Look, we're also replacing poisonous lead pipes that go into 10 million homes in America, 400,000 school and child care centers. So every child in America can drink the water instead of having permanent damage to their brain. Look, we're making sure that every community in America has access to affordable high-speed internet. No parent should have to drive by McDonald's parking lot to help them do their homework online with their kids, which many thousands were doing across the country. And when we do these projects, and again, I get criticized for this, but I make no excuses for it, we're going to buy American. We're going to buy America. Folks, and it's totally consistent with international trade rules. Buy America has been the law since 1933, but for too long, past administrations, Democrat and Republican, have fought to get around it. Not anymore. Tonight, I'm announcing new standards that require all construction materials used in federal infrastructure projects to be made in America. Made in America. I mean it. Lumber, glass, drywall, fiber optic cable. And on my watch, American roads, bridges, and American highways are going to be made with American products as well. Folks, my economic plan is about investing in places and people that have been forgotten. So many of you listening to me tonight, I know you feel it. So many of you felt like you've just simply been forgotten. Amid the economic upheaval of the past 4 decades, too many people have been left behind and treated like they're invisible. Maybe that's you watching from home. Remember the jobs that went away. You remember them, don't you? The folks at home remember them. You wonder whether the path even exists anymore for your children to get ahead without having to move away. Well, that's why I get that. That's why we're building an economy where no one's left behind. Jobs are coming back. Pride is coming back. Because choices we made in the last several years. You know, this is, in my view, a blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America and make a real difference in your lives at home. For example, too many of you lay in bed at night like my dad did, staring at the ceiling, wondering what in God's name happens if your spouse gets cancer, or your child gets deadly ill, or something happens to you. What are you going to have? You get money to pay for those medical bills? Or are you going to have to sell the house or try to get a second mortgage on it? I get it. I get it. With the Inflation Reduction Act that I signed into law, we're taking on powerful interests to bring health care costs down so you can sleep better at night with more security. You know, we pay more for prescription drugs than any nation in the world. Let me say it again. We pay more for prescription drugs than any major nation on earth. For example, 1 in 10 Americans has diabetes. Many of you in this chamber do, and in the audience. But every day, millions need insulin to control their diabetes so they can literally stay alive. Insulin's been around for over 100 years. The guy who invented it didn't even patent it because he wanted it to be available for everyone. It costs the drug companies roughly $10 a vial to make that insulin. Packaging it all, you may get up to $13. But Big Pharma has been unfairly charging people hundreds of dollars, $400 to $500 a month, making record profits. Not anymore. Not anymore. So many things that we did are only now coming to fruition. We said we were doing this, and we said we passed the law to do it, but people didn't know because the law didn't take effect until January 1 of this year. We capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors on Medicare. People are just finding out. I'm sure you're getting the same calls I'm getting. Look, there are millions of other Americans who do not or are not on Medicare, including 200,000 young people with type 1 diabetes who need this insulin to stay alive. Let's finish the job this time. Let's cap the cost of insulin for everybody at $35. Folks, and Big Pharma's still going to do very well, I promise you all. I promise you they're going to do very well. This law also caps and won't even go into effect until 2025. Costs, out-of-pocket drug costs for seniors on Medicare at a maximum of $2,000 a year. You don't have to pay more than $2,000 a year, no matter how much your drug costs are. Because you know why? You all know it. Many of you, like many in my family, have cancer. You know the drugs can range from $10,000, $11,000, $14,000, $15,000 for the cancer drugs. If drug prices rise faster than inflation, drug companies are going to have to pay Medicare back the difference. We're finally giving Medicare the power to negotiate drug prices. Bringing down prescription drug costs doesn't just save seniors money, it cuts the federal deficit by billions of dollars, by hundreds of billions of dollars, because these prescription drugs are drugs purchased by Medicare to keep their commitment to the seniors. Well, guess what? Instead of paying $400 or $500 a month, you're paying $15. That's a lot of savings for the federal government. And by the way, why wouldn't we want that? Now, some members here are threatening, and I know it's not an official party position, so I'm not going to exaggerate, but threatening to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. As my coach, that's okay, that's fair. As my football coach used to say, lots of luck in your senior year. Make no mistake, if you try anything to raise the cost of prescription drugs, I will veto it. Look, I'm pleased to say that more Americans have health insurance now than ever in history. A record 16 million people are enrolled in the Affordable Care Act. And thanks to the law I signed last year, saving millions are saving $800 a year on their premiums. And by the way, that law was written and the benefit expires in 2025. So my plea to some of you, at least in this audience, let's finish the job and make these savings permanent. Expand coverage of Medicaid. Look, the Inflation Reduction Act is also the most significant investment ever in climate change. Ever. Lowering utility bills, creating American jobs, leading the world to a clean energy future. I visited the devastating aftermath of record floods, droughts, storms, and wildfires from Arizona to New Mexico to all the way up to the Canadian border. More timber has been burned, that I've observed from helicopters, than the entire state of Missouri. And we don't have global warming? Not a problem. In addition to emergency recovery, from Puerto Rico to Florida to Idaho, we're rebuilding for the long term. New electric grids that are able to weather major storms and not prevent those forest fires. Roads and water systems withstand the next big flood. Clean energy to cut pollution and create jobs in communities often left behind. We're going to build 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations installed across the country by tens of thousands of IBEW workers. And we're helping families save more than $1,000 a year with tax credits to purchase electric vehicles and efficient appliances, energy-efficient appliances. Historic conservation efforts to be responsible stewards of our land. Let's face reality. The climate crisis doesn't care if you're in a red or blue state. It's an existential threat. We have an obligation, not to ourselves, but to our children and grandchildren, to confront it. I'm proud of how America, at last, is stepping up to the challenge. We're still going to need oil and gas for a while. But guess what? No, we do. But there's so much more to do. We got to finish the job. And we pay for these investments in our future by finally making the wealthiest and biggest
Say the loud
corporations
part.
begin
Say the
to
quiet
pay
part
their
out
fair
loud,
share.
Republicans. Just tell us that you
Just begin.
all you care about is oil. You don't care about
I'm a
cutting prescription
capitalist.
costs. You don't
I'm a
care
capitalist,
about
but pay your fair share.
climate change. You
I
clap
think
for
a
oil.
lot of you at home agree with me and
Ridiculous.
many people that you know. The tax system is not fair. It is not fair. Look, the idea that in 2020, 55 of the largest corporations in America, the Fortune 500, made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal taxes? Zero? Folks, it's simply not fair. But now, because of the law I signed, billion-dollar companies have to pay a minimum of 15%. God love them. 15%. That's less than a nurse pays. And let me be crystal clear. I said at the very beginning, under my plans, as long as I'm president, nobody earning less than $400,000 will pay an additional penny in taxes. Nobody, not one penny. But let's finish the job. There's more to do. We have to reward work, not just wealth. Pass my proposal for the billionaire minimum tax. You know, there's 1,000 billionaires in America. It's up from about 600 in the beginning of the term. But no billionaire should be paying a lower tax rate than a school teacher or firefighter. I mean it. Think about it. I mean, look. I know you aren't enthusiastic about that, but think about it. Think about it. Have you noticed Big Oil just reported its profits, record profits? Last year they made $200 billion in the midst of a global energy crisis. I think it's outrageous. Why? They invested too little of that profit to increase domestic production. And when I talk to a couple of them, they say, we're afraid you're going to shut down all the oil wells, all the oil refineries anyway, so why should we invest in them? I said, we're going to need oil for at least another decade. And that's going to exceed, and beyond that, we're going to need it. Production. If they had, in fact, invested in the production to keep gas prices down, instead, they used the record profits to buy back their own stock, rewarding their CEOs and shareholders. Corporations ought to do the right thing. That's why I propose we quadruple the tax on corporate stock buybacks and encourage long-term investments. They'll still make considerable profit. Let's finish the job and close the loopholes that allow very wealthy to avoid paying their taxes. Instead of cutting the number of audits for wealthy taxpayers, I just signed a law to reduce the deficit by $114 billion by cracking down on wealthy tax cheats. That's being fiscally responsible. In the last 2 years, my administration has cut the deficit by more than $1.7 trillion. the largest deficit reduction in American history. Under the previous administration, the American deficit went up 4 years in a row. Because those record deficits, no president added more to the national debt in any 4 years than my predecessor. Nearly 25% of the entire national debt that took over 200 years to accumulate was added by just one administration alone, the last one. They're the facts. Check it out. Check it out. How did Congress respond to that debt? They did the right thing. They lifted the debt ceiling 3 times without preconditions or crisis. They paid American bills to prevent an economic disaster in the country. So tonight I'm asking the Congress to follow suit. Let's commit here tonight to the full faith and credit of the United States of America will never, ever be questioned. So some of my Republican friends want to take the economy hostage. I get it, unless I agree to their economic plans. All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you. No, I tell you, I enjoy conversion. You know, it means if Congress doesn't keep the programs the way they are, they'd go away. Other Republicans say, I'm not saying it's a majority of you. I don't even think it's even a significant, but it's being proposed by individuals. I'm not
she is so
politely not
disgusting.
naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you. Look, folks, the idea is that we're not going to be moved into being threatened to default on the debt if we don't respond. Folks, as we all apparently agree, Social Security and Medicare is off the books now, right? They're not to be stopped. All right. I'm ready. We got unanimity.
Yeah, you're not all standing up now, are you? Oh.
Social Security and Medicare, a lifeline for millions of seniors.
Oh.
Americans have to
Oh, he
pay
wasn't
into them
lying.
from the very first paycheck
Interesting.
they started. So tonight, let's all agree, and we apparently are. Let's stand up for seniors.
Yeah. There you go. Because you guys were all just lying, yelling at Biden that he was lying about some of you wanting to sunset those programs, but then when he said that they're good, we won't touch them, not all of you stood up. Interesting.
And if anyone tries to cut Social Security, which apparently no one's going to do, and if anyone tries to cut Medicare, I'll stop them. I'll veto it. And look, I'm not going to allow them to be taken away. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. But apparently it's not going to be a problem. Next month, when I offer my fiscal plan, I ask my Republican friends to lay down their plan as well. I really mean it. Let's sit down together and discuss our mutual plans together. Let's do that.
Oh, they're so disgusting.
I can tell you, the plan I'm going to show you is going to cut the deficit by another $2 trillion. And it won't cut a single bit of Medicare or Social Security. In fact, we're going to extend the Medicare Trust Fund at least 2 decades, because that's going to be the next argument. How do we keep it solvent, right? Well, we'll not raise tax on anyone making under 400 grand, but we'll pay for it the way we talked about tonight, by making sure that the wealthy and big corporations pay their fair share. Look. Here's the deal. They aren't just taking advantage of the tax code. They're taking advantage of you, the American consumer. Here's my message to all of you out there. I have your back. We're already preventing Americans from receiving surprise medical bills, stopping $1 billion surprise bills per month so far. We're protecting seniors' life savings by cracking down on nursing homes that commit fraud, endanger patient safety, prescribe drugs that are not needed. Millions of Americans can now save thousands of dollars because they can finally get a hearing aid over the counter without a prescription. Look, capitalism without competition is not capitalism. It's extortion. It's exploitation. Last year, I cracked down with the help of many of you on foreign shipping companies that were making you pay higher prices for every good coming into the country. I signed a bipartisan bill that cut shipping costs by 90%, helping American farmers, businessmen, and consumers. Let's finish the job. Pass the bipartisan legislation to strengthen antitrust enforcement and prevent big online platforms from giving their own products an unfair advantage.
Pretty sure that's aimed at Google and their
My
search
administration
results.
is also taking on junk fees, those hidden surcharges too many companies
Maybe
use to
Amazon
make you
as
pay
well.
more. For example, we're making airlines show you the full ticket price up front, refund your money if your flight is canceled or delayed. We've reduced exorbitant bank overdrafts by saving consumers more than $1 billion a year. We're cutting credit card late fees by 75% from $30 to $8. Look, junk fees may not matter to the very wealthy, but they matter to most other folks in homes like the one I grew up in, like many of you did. They add up to hundreds of dollars a month. They make it harder for you to pay your bills or afford that family trip. I know how unfair it feels when a company overcharges you and gets away with it. Not anymore. We've written a bill to stop it all. It's called the Junk Fee Prevention Act. We're going to ban surprise resort fees that hotels charge on your bill. Those fees can cost you up to $90 a night at hotels that aren't even resorts. The idea that cable, internet, and cell phone companies can charge you $200 or more if you decide to switch to another provider. Give me a break. We can stop service fees on tickets to concerts and sporting events and make companies disclose all the fees up front. And we'll prohibit airlines from charging $50 round trip for a family just to be able to sit together. Baggage fees are bad enough. Airlines can't treat your child like a piece of baggage. Americans are tired of being. We're tired of being played for suckers. So pass the Junk Fee Prevention Act so companies stop ripping us off. For too long, workers have been getting stiffed, but not anymore. We're beginning to restore the dignity of work. For example, I should have known this, but I didn't until 2 years ago. 30 million workers have to sign non-compete agreements for the jobs they take. 30 million. So a cashier at a burger place can't walk across town and take the same job at another burger place and make a few bucks more. It just changed. But they just changed it because we exposed it. That was part of the deal, guys. Look it up. But not anymore. We're banning those agreements so companies have to compete for workers and pay them what they're worth. And I must tell you, this is bound to get a response from my friends on my left but the right. I'm so sick and tired of companies breaking the law by preventing workers from organizing. Pass the PRO Act, because businesses have a right, workers have a right to form a union. And let's guarantee all workers have a living wage. Let's make sure working parents can afford to raise a family with sick days, paid family medical leave, affordable child care. That's going to enable millions of more people to go and stay at work. And let's restore the full child tax credit, which gave tens of millions of parents some breathing room and cut child poverty in half to the lowest level in history. And by the way, when we do all these things, we increase productivity. We increase economic growth. So let's finish the job and get more families access to affordable, quality housing. Let's get seniors who want to stay in their homes the care they need to do so. Let's give more breathing room to millions of family caregivers looking after their loved ones. Pass my plan so we get seniors and people with disabilities the home care and services they need. And support the workers who are doing God's work. These plans are fully paid for, and we can afford to do them. Restoring the dignity of work means making education an affordable ticket to the middle class. You know, when we made public education, 12 years of it, universal in the last century, we made the best educated, best paid, we became the best educated, best paid nation in the world. But the rest of the world's caught up. It's caught up. Jill, my wife, who teaches full time, has an expression. I hope I get it right, kid. Any nation that out-educates us is going to out-compete us. Any nation that out-educates is going to out-compete us. Folks, we all know 12 years of education is not enough to win the economic competition of the 21st century. We want to have the best educated workforce. Let's finish the job by providing access to preschool for 3 and 4 years old. Studies show that children who go to preschool are nearly 50% more likely to finish high school and go on to earn a 2 or 4 year degree, no matter their background they came from. Let's give public school teachers a raise. We're making progress by reducing student debt, increasing Pell Grants for working and middle-class families. Let's finish the job and connect students to career opportunities starting in high school. Provide access to 2 years of community college, the best career training in America in addition to being a pathway to a 4-year degree. Let's offer every American a path to a good career, whether they go to college or not. And folks, in the midst of the COVID crisis, when schools were closed and we were shutting down everything, let's recognize how far we came in the fight against the pandemic itself. While the virus is not gone, thanks to the resilience of the American people and the ingenuity of medicine, we've broken the COVID grip on us. COVID deaths are down by 90%. We've saved millions of lives and opened up our country. We opened our country back up, and soon we'll end the public health emergency. But that's called a public health emergency. But we'll remember the toll and pain that's never going to go away. More than 1 million Americans lost their lives to COVID. 1 million. Families grieving, children orphaned. Empty chairs at the dining room table constantly reminding you that she used to sit there. Remembering them, we remain vigilant. We still need to monitor dozens of variants and support new vaccines and treatments. So Congress needs to fund these efforts and keep America safe. And as we emerge from this crisis stronger, we're also got to double down on prosecuting criminals who stole relief money meant to keep workers and small businesses afloat. Before I came to office, you remember, during that campaign, the big issue was about inspector generals who would protect taxpayers' dollars who were sidelined. They were fired. Many people said we don't need them. And fraud became rampant. Last year, I told you the watchdogs are back. Since then, we've recovered billions of taxpayers' dollars. Now let's triple the anti-fraud strike force going after these criminals, double the statute of limitations on these crimes, and crack down on identity fraud by criminal syndicates stealing billions of dollars from the American people. And the data shows that for every dollar we put into fighting fraud, the taxpayers get back at least 10 times as much. It matters. It matters. Look, COVID left its scars, like the spike in violent crime in 2020, the first year of the pandemic. We have an obligation to make sure all people are safe. Public safety depends on public trust, as all of us know. But too often that trust is violated. Joining us tonight are the parents of Tyree Nichols. Welcome. We had to bury Tyree last week. As many of you personally know, there's no words to describe the heartache or grief of losing a child. But imagine if you lost that child at the hands of the law. Imagine having to worry whether your son or daughter came home from walking down the street, or playing in the park, or just driving a car. Most of us in here have never had to have the talk that brown and black parents have had to have with their children. Bo, Hunter, Ashley, my children, I never had to have the talk with them. I never had to tell them if a police officer pulls you over, turn your interior lights on right away. Don't reach for your license. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Imagine having to worry like that every single time your kid got in a car. Here's what Tyree's mother shared with me when I spoke to her. When I asked her how she finds the courage to carry on and speak out. With the faith of God, she said her son was, quote, a beautiful soul, and something good will come of this. Imagine how much courage and character that takes. It's up to us, to all of us. We all want the same thing. Neighborhoods free of violence. Law enforcement who earns the community's trust. Just as every cop, when they pin on that badge in the morning, has a right to be able to go home at night, so does everybody else out there. Our children have a right to come home safely. Equal protection under the law is a covenant we have with each other in America. We know police officers put their lives on the line every single night and day. And we know we ask them in many cases to do too much, to be counselors, social workers, psychologists, responding to drug overdoses, mental health crises, and so much more. In one sense, we ask much too much of them. I know most cops and their families are good, decent, honorable people, the vast majority. But they risk their lives every time they put that shield on. But what happened to Tyree in Memphis happens too often. We have to do better. Give law enforcement the real training they need. Hold them to higher standards. Help them succeed in keeping us safe. We also need more first responders and professionals to address the growing mental health, substance abuse challenges. More resources to reduce violent crime and gun crime. More community intervention programs. More investment in housing, education, and job training. All this can help prevent violence in the first place. And when police officers or police departments violate the public trust, they must be held accountable. With the support of the families of victims, civil rights groups, and law enforcement, I signed an executive order for all federal officers, banning chokeholds, restricting no-knock warrants, and other key elements of the George Floyd Act. Let's commit ourselves to make the words of Tyler's mom true. Something good must come from this. Something good. And all of us, Folks, it's difficult, but it's simple. All of us in this chamber, we need to rise to this moment. We can't turn away. Let's do what we know in our hearts that we need to do. Let's come together to finish the job on police reform. Do something. Do something. That was the plea of parents who lost their children in Uvalde. I met with every one of them. Do something about gun violence. Thank God. Thank God we did. Passing the most sweeping gun safety law in 3 decades. That includes things like that the majority of responsible gun owners already support. Enhanced background checks for 18 to 21 years old. Red flag laws, keeping guns out of the hands of people who are a danger to themselves and others. But we know our work is not done. Joining us tonight is Brandon Say, a 26-year-old hero. Brandon put his college dreams on hold to be at his mom's side. His mom's side when she was dying from cancer. And Brandon now works at the dance studio started by his grandparents. And 2 weeks ago, during the Lunar New Year celebrations, he heard the studio door close, and he saw a man standing there pointing a semi-automatic pistol at him. He thought he was going to die, but he thought about the people inside. And in that instant, he found the courage to act and wrestled a semi-automatic pistol away from the gunman who had already killed 11 people in another dance studio. 11. He saved lives. It's time we do the same. Ban assault weapons now. Ban them now. Once and for all. I led the fight to do that in 1994. And in 10 years, that ban was law and mass shootings went down. After we let it expire in the Republican administration, mass shootings tripled. Let's finish the job and ban these assault weapons. And let's also come together on immigration. Make it a bipartisan issue once again. We now have a record number of personnel working to secure the border, arresting 8,000 human smugglers, seizing over 23,000 pounds of fentanyl in just the last several months. We've launched a new border plan last month. Unlawful migration from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela has come down 97% as a consequence of that. But American border problems won't be fixed until Congress acts. If we don't pass my comprehensive immigration reform, at least pass my plan to provide the equipment and officers to secure the border. And a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, those on temporary status, farm workers, essential workers. Here in the People's House, it's our duty to protect all the people's rights and freedoms. Congress must restore the right and the...
Wow.
Congress must restore
so
the
pathetic.
right that was taken away in Roe v. Wade and protect Roe v. Wade. Give every woman a consular right. The Vice President and I are doing everything to protect access to reproductive health care and safeguard patient safety. But already more than a dozen states are enforcing extreme abortion bans. Make no mistake about it. If Congress passes a national ban, I will veto it. But let's also pass the Bipartisan Equality Act to ensure LGBTQ Americans, especially transgender young people, can live with safety and dignity. Our strength is not just the example of our power, but the power of our example. Let's remember the world's watching, I spoke from this chamber 1 year ago, just days after Vladimir Putin unleashed his brutal attack against Ukraine. A murderous assault, evoking images of death and destruction Europe suffered in World War II. Putin's invasion has been a test for the ages, a test for America, a test for the world. Would we stand for the most basic of principles? Would we stand for sovereignty? Would we stand for the right of people to live free of tyranny? Would we stand for the defense of democracy? For such defense matters to us because it keeps peace and prevents open season on would-be aggressors and threatens our prosperity. 1 year later, we know the answer. Yes, we would, and we did. We did. And together, we did what America always does at our best. We led. We united NATO. We built a global coalition. We stood against Putin's aggression. We stood with the Ukrainian people. Tonight, we're once again joined by Ukrainian's ambassador to the United States. She represents not just her nation, but the courage of her people. Our ambassador is here, we're united in our support of your country. Will you stand so we can all take a look at you? Thank you. Because we're going to stand with you as long as it takes. Our nation's working for more freedom, more dignity, more peace, not just in Europe, but everywhere. Before I came to office, the story was about how the People's Republic of China was increasing its power and America was failing in the world. Not anymore. We made clear, and I made clear in my personal conversations, which have been many, with President Xi, that we seek competition, not conflict. But I will make no apologies that we're investing to make America stronger. Investing in American innovation and industries that will define the future that China intends to be dominating. Investing in our alliances and working with our allies to protect advanced technologies so they will not be used against us. Modernizing our military to safeguard stability and deter aggression. Today, we're in the strongest position in decades to compete with China or anyone else in the world. Anyone else in the world. And I'm committed. I'm committed to work with China where we can advance American interests and benefit the world. But make no mistake about it. As we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did. Look, let's be clear. Winning the competition should unite all of us. We face serious challenges across the world. But in the past 2 years, democracies have become stronger, not weaker. Autocracy has grown weaker, not stronger. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one. Name me one. America's rallying the world to meet those challenges, from climate to global health, to food insecurity, to terrorism, to territorial aggression. Allies are stepping up, spending more, and doing more. Look, the bridges we're forming between partners in the Pacific and those in the Atlantic, and those who bet against America are learning how wrong they are. It's never, ever been a good bet to bet against America. Never. Well, when I came to office, most assured that bipartisanship assumed was impossible, but never believed it. That's why a year ago I offered a unity agenda to the nation as I stood here. We made real progress together. We passed a law making it easy for doctors to prescribe effective treatments for opioid addiction. We passed the gun safety law, making historic investments in mental health. We launched the ARPA-H drive for breakthrough in the fights against cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes, and so much more. we passed the Heath Robinson PACT Act, named after the late Iraq War veteran whose story about exposure to toxic burn kits I shared here last year. I understand something about those burn pits, but there's so much more to do. We can do it together. Joining us tonight is a father named Doug from Newton, New Hampshire. He wrote Jill, my wife, a letter, and me as well, about his courageous daughter, Courtney. A contagious laugh, his sister's best friend, her sister's best friend. He shared a story all too familiar to millions of Americans and many of you in the audience. Courtney discovered pills in high school. It spiraled into addiction and eventually death from a fentanyl overdose. She was just 20 years old. Describing the last 8 years without her, Doug said, "There's no worse pain." Yet their family has turned pain to purpose, working to end the stigma and change laws. He told us he wants to start a journey toward American recovery. Doug, we're with you. Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year. Big, you got it.
Oh, goodness. She just is screaming. This is absurd.
So let's launch a major surge to stop fentanyl production and the sale and trafficking with more drug detection machines, inspection cargo, stop pills and powder at the border. Working with couriers like FedEx to inspect more packages for drugs. Strong penalties to crack down on fentanyl trafficking. Second, let's do more on mental health, especially for our children. When millions of young people are struggling with bullying, violence, trauma, we owe them greater access to mental health care at their schools. We must finally hold social media companies accountable for experimenting they're doing running children for profit. It's time to pass bipartisan legislation to stop big tech from collecting personal data on our kids and teenagers online. Ban targeted advertising to children and impose stricter limits on the personal data that companies collect on all of us. Third, let's do more to keep this nation's one truly sacred obligation to equip those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home. Job training, job placement for veterans and their spouses as they come to return to civilian life. Helping veterans afford the rent, because no one should be homeless in America, especially someone who served the country. Dennis McDonough is here of the VA. We had a first real discussion when I asked him to take the job. I'm glad he did. We were losing up to 25 veterans a day on suicide. Now we're losing 17 a day to the silent scourge of suicide. 17 veterans a day are committing suicide. More than all the people being killed in the wars. Folks, VA is doing everything it can, including expanding mental health screening, proven programs that recruits veterans to help other veterans understand what they're going through, get them the help they need. We got to do more. And fourth, last year, Jill and I reignited the cancer moonshot that I was able to start with President Obama asked me to lead our administration on this issue. Our goal is to cut the cancer death rates at least by 50% in the next 25 years. Turn more cancers from death sentences to treatable diseases. Provide more support for patients and their families. It's personal to so many of us in this audience. Joining us are Morris and Candice, an Irishman and the daughter of immigrants from Panama. They met and fell in love in New York City and got married in the same chapel Jill and I got married in New York City. Kindred spirits. He wrote us a letter about his little daughter, Ava, and I saw her just before I came over. She was just a year old when she was diagnosed with rare kidney disease, cancer. After 26 blood transfusions, 11 rounds of radiation, 8 rounds of chemo, 1 kidney removed, giving a 5% survival rate. He wrote how in the darkest moments he thought, if she goes, I can't stay. Many of you have been through that as well. Jill and I understand that like so many of you. And he read Jill's book describing our family's cancer journey and how we tried to steal moments of joy where we could with Bo. For them, that glimmer of joy was the half smile of their baby girl. It meant everything to them. They never gave up hope. Little Ava never gave up hope. She turns 4 next month. They just found out Ava's beating the odds, is on her way to being cured of cancer. And she's watching from the White House tonight, and she's not asleep already. For the lives we can save.
That's got to be really tough
For the lives
to
we can save
celebrate,
and the
but
lives
know
we've
that
lost.
you're still
Let
in
this
so
be a
much.
truly American moment.
It's still a
That
tough road
rallies the
ahead.
country and the world together and prove that we can still do big things. 20 years ago, under the leadership of President Bush and countless advocates and champions, he undertook a bipartisan effort through PEPFAR to transform the global fight against HIV/AIDS. It's been a huge success. He thought big. He thought large. He moved. I believe we can do the same thing with cancer. Let's end cancer as we know it. Cure some cancers once and for all. Folks, there's one reason why we've been able to do all of these things. Our democracy itself. It's the most fundamental thing of all. With democracy, everything's possible. Without it, nothing is. For the last few years, our democracy has been threatened and attacked, put at risk, put to the test in this very room on January the 6th. And then just a few months ago, an unhinged big lie assailed and unleashed a political violence, the home of the then Speaker of the House of Representatives, using the very same language the insurrectionists used as they stalked these halls and chanted on January 6th. Here tonight in this chamber is a man who bears the scars of that brutal attack, but is as tough and as strong, as resilient as they get. My friend Paul Pelosi. Paul,
Shit! Oh, shit! Oh, wow. If you haven't seen the video, the police cam, then maybe you don't understand my reaction.
It's such a heinous act should have never happened.
That's amazing that he's there.
We must all speak out.
Wow.
There's no place for political violence in America. We have to protect the right to vote, not suppress the fundamental right. Honor the results of our elections, not subvert the will of the people. We have to uphold the rule of law and restore trust in our institutions of democracy. And we must give hate and extremism in any form no safe harbor. Democracy must not be a partisan issue. It's an American issue. Every generation of Americans has faced a moment where they have been called to protect our democracy, defend it, stand up for it. And this is our moment. My fellow Americans, we meet tonight at an inflection point, one of those moments that only a few generations ever face, where the direction we now take is going to decide the course of this nation for decades to come. We're not bystanders of history. We're not powerless before the forces that confront us. It's within our power of we, the people. We're facing the test of our time. We have to be the nation we've always been at our best, optimistic, hopeful, forward-looking. A nation that embraces light over dark, hope over fear, unity over division, stability over chaos. We have to see each other not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. We're good people. The only nation in the world built on an idea, the only one. Other nations
Yeah, it's hard for some of those Democrats to stand
defined
up
by
for that,
geography, ethnicity.
knowing how disgustingly corrupt and,
we're the only
and
nation based on an idea
anti-democratic these Republicans are.
that all of us, every one of us, is created equal in the image of God. A nation that stands as a beacon of the world. A nation in a new age of possibilities. So I've come to fulfill my constitutional obligation to report in the State of the Union. And here's my report. Because the soul of this nation is strong, because the backbone of this nation is strong, because the people of this nation are strong, the State of the Union is strong.
Kevin McCarthy doesn't know whether to clap or not. What a sleaze. What a sleaze.
I'm not new to this place. I stand here tonight having served as long as about any one of you have ever served here. But I've never been more optimistic about our future, about the future of America. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
Well done, Joe. Way to bring it home.
And we have been listening to President
Way to bring it home.
Biden's State of the Union address. He's just wrapped up his remarks. You see him shaking hands.
Man,
there
you've got to
with
be
Vice
you've
President
got to be
Kamala Harris. The president will
patient.
now make his way.
You have got to
out
be
of the-
patient if you are Joe Biden to sit there and to have Marjorie Taylor Greene yell at you a half dozen times from everything from China to immigration to Social Security. Like, oh, Kevin McCarthy, the fact that you legitimized her and put her on committees, you're so disgusting. You're such a sleaze.
Out to you from what the president had to say tonight.
Well, what we saw was a president on fire, a president who has a strong record to tout, lots of accomplishments, things that have been passed that he can talk about, numbers, facts, and figures that he can already talk about, projecting into the future of more things to come that haven't been implemented yet. You brought up the thing that stood out to me, let's finish the job. And then, you know, he brought the tone that I was looking for, and he ended his speech in the way
He's shaking hands with senators,
basically all of
people who
his
he's
speeches.
spent decades
And that
with.
is when he gets to the point where he says, we are the United States of America. He almost growls it in a very forceful, passionate way to remind us in word and in tone that this is a nation that when we put our minds to it, we can get a lot of things done. And so by repeating that line at the end of every speech, he's trying to move us to a place that we're still seemingly reticent to move to just because of the sheer polarization of the country right now.
David Brooks, President Biden hit a number of notes talking about bipartisanship, appealing directly to Republicans, saying, my friends, if we work together before, we can still work together. There were some raucous back and forths a little bit during the proceedings tonight, but he came right out in a very disarming way and congratulated Speaker McCarthy for being there as well. What did you make of the way he spoke to folks across the aisle?
Well, if you look at his policies, a lot of them are going to Republicans. There's a lot of money that goes to high school educated folks in some of the red states. And that's pretty Joe Biden. The economy that he cares about is the woman making
That's a good point.
repairing bridges in Cincinnati. That's sort of the core of where his heart of America is. I thought just politically, a lot of Democrats will be heartened if they thought he was getting too old and tired. I think this speech will be an antidote to that. They'll say, oh yeah, I feel comfortable with this guy. I thought, you know, the phrase that leapt out, blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America, that's really the core of who he is. And so I do think it was, as Jonathan said, quite a strong speech for a Congress that did a lot. And then finally, we began to see some of the Marjorie Taylor Greene, some of the House of Commons fraucuses going on, and that's a sign that the tongues of extremism are still in that room. And he dealt with them, I thought, pretty well, actually.
And a sign of the challenge for Speaker McCarthy ahead as well, right?
President Biden speaking
And
for an hour and 12.
there's Adam Schiff, who actually just announced, I think in the past week, right, that he's going to be running for the Senate in California. So that is going to be exciting to watch. You know, there's being a progressive, being, you know, someone who comes from like the liberal side of things, you hear, you know, him kind of dance around healthcare, and you don't hear him talk about single payer. You hear him talking about capping insulin and talking about reducing prescription prices, and that's fine, you know, but the speech I felt kind of in the first half an hour of it, I mean, again, he's having to balance, right, this the hyperpartisanship of the House of Representatives and even the Senate too. I mean, let's be real. But I feel like I would give the first half an hour like a 6 or 7 of that speech. But I thought he closed really well. I think the really frustrating thing for me is sitting there and having this president, right, who was a rebuke to Donald Trump in a lot of ways, and a continuation of the Obama era, to have him kind of try to balance that line of hyperpartisanship, and to watch these Republicans sit there and do nothing about, they didn't celebrate, they didn't clap for infrastructure, right? They didn't clap for education. They didn't clap for reforming the tax code. And then these guys want to sit back and go, no, we're the party of the people. And it's like, wait a minute. Why was the first and one of the very few times that you guys clapped was when Joe Biden talked about the need for oil? Like, you guys don't just represent oil states. You don't just represent people who work on oil drills. You represent the American public, and not everybody is tied into oil, but you guys are. Right? And that was the most blatant thing that stuck out to me, was, okay, the oil lobby has their hands up in the Republican Party. And it's like I said during the live stream, they say the quiet part out loud. When Joe Biden talks about the need for oil, and the Republicans go wild. Oh, yeah, that's amazing. But again, not for capping insulin prices, right? And not even for protecting Social Security and Medicaid, right? Because he brought up, and that was one of the most, you know, that was when there was a lot of raucous in the chamber, when he talked about how there are some Republicans who want to sunset Social Security, and the Republicans, how dare you? Marjorie Taylor Greene was on camera shouting, you lie, liar. And so he says, okay, so then it's good, right? So then we're gonna protect it, and we're gonna expand it. Oh, and then only half of the Republicans stand up and cheer. And he's like, well, wait a minute. Well, I mean, I thought you guys were all on board with, I thought none of you wanted to sunset it. And so it just, the Republican Party, there again, the idea of being conservative is you look out for yourself, right? And the whole idea actually works against being in government, because it's not really about helping out the others, right? It's about helping out yourself. And the whole idea of being in government is to help out the entirety of the nation. So that's why we're seeing things, right, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and these other Republicans just screaming and ranting when Joe Biden is talking about protecting Social Security. I thought there were some other really important moments. Of course, seeing Tyree Nichols' parents was like pulling at the heartstrings. Watching, I don't know what pulled at my heartstrings more, watching that mom receive the mother of the 3-year-old who's the 3-year-old who's turning 4, I think it was, who beat the odds, right? They didn't think she would survive. I think Joe Biden said that there was a 5% chance that she would survive, and she's turning 4 years old, right? And parents stand up, and they receive that celebratory applause, but you could tell on that mom's face that she had been through so much, and there's still so much more possibly ahead of her, that it was almost kind of hard for her to accept that, and hard for her to be there, and hard for her to be in the spotlight. I felt that I felt her on that. That's how I kind of perceived that situation. I thought that was really tough. But I love the way, Joe Biden ended things. I would give the last half an hour of the speech, right, like a 9 out of 10, calling for the ban of banning assault weapons, talking about protecting the LGBTQIA plus community and transgender Americans, talking about police and how Americans are dealing with that, talking about the need to improve our mental health care. I thought he did a fantastic job. Let's listen to Laura Barron Lopez. I was watching her discuss some things prior to the State of the Union, and I think she's in the Capitol. Let's see if she can grab some interviews.
That was something that wasn't in his prepared remarks and that he ad-libbed on, saying people didn't know because it hasn't taken effect yet. And in that instance, he was specifically talking about the cap on insulin prices, capping it at $35 for seniors on Medicare. And he called on Congress to go further and to cap insulin costs for all Americans. The other thing that stood out, Amna, was when the president talked about combating inflation through specifically junk fees. This is something that the White House has been focused on a lot lately. This proposal and the bill that they've issued on junk fees, talking about trying to go after bank overdraft fees, credit card late fees, as well as this line that stood out saying that that airlines are treating your children like baggage. This is him trying to clearly show that he hears that not all Americans are feeling as though they're getting help in their pocketbooks. And this has been a key element for the White House in recent months. And then lastly, Amna, of course, when President Joe Biden talked about the, quote, the talk, which is the talk that Black and brown families have with their kids about police and their interactions with police. And to hear President Biden talk about that, a white president, especially after he worked as vice president for President Barack Obama, it reminded me of when Obama specifically talked about the personal feelings that he felt when Trayvon Martin was killed in 2012, and that if he had had a son, his son would have looked like Trayvon Martin. President Biden, this is an issue that has police brutality as well as the racial reckoning that the country has faced through all of these killings of Black people is something that he struggled with during the 2020 presidential campaign. He came under fire from fellow Democrats, including Senator Cory Booker, including Senator Kamala Harris, for the way that he talked about how he worked with segregationists when he was in the Senate. And so this is something to hear him come full circle and to very aggressively talk about what it was like, and that empathetic tone that you mentioned, Amna, was really striking.
It was a powerful moment there, and of course acknowledging as well.
Yeah, but on that note, you kind of see why he took flack from Cory Booker and why he got hit from the left, because Biden wasn't really strong, talking about the police and talking about that. I mean, I thought that moment where he brought up the talk, I thought that was great. I thought that was fantastic. But a topic like that is in such need of a type of a poetic like encapsulation and goal to move towards, a light kind of at the end of the tunnel. And of course, Joe Biden isn't Barack Obama, right? But not only his skin color and his ability to talk to Black and brown Americans, but also just his eloquence. So that's tough for him. But at the same time, I think his speechwriters, I think they needed to really hammer that topic, especially having the Nichols there in the audience.
Feeling is because of Joe Biden's reckless spending. That's the argument you should expect to hear, I think, from Republicans after the president leaves the chamber and over the course of the campaign in 2024. But I think the fact that the president spent most of his time talking about what he had already accomplished, the administration had already accomplished, the 300 bipartisan bills that were already passed, rather than trying to focus on big, huge things we're going to get done in the next 2 years, is a nod to the reality of a divided Congress, and also a nod to the fact that he's going to be spending a lot more time these next year and a half talking about what has happened as opposed to what could happen.
Jonathan Capehart, can we talk about the new urgency that Democrats are trying to inject into this police reform effort? I just saw Congressman Al Green on the floor there, and he has a button. We saw a number of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus wearing these 1870 pins, marking the year that the first unarmed, at the time, first free black man was killed by a police officer. We heard President Biden invoke the words of Tyre Nichols' mom, saying that he was a beautiful soul and something good will come of this. I certainly wish Mrs. Wells grace and peace. That something good might not come in the form of police reform legislation, because the underlying fundamentals haven't changed a bit since the George Floyd bill was tanked.
Right. What we have now is, before you had a Democratic-controlled House, Democratic-controlled Senate, and a Democratic president in the White House. It passed the House, but then went down in a ball of flames in the Senate because Cory Booker of New Jersey, Democrat, and Tim Scott, Republican of South Carolina, couldn't come to an agreement. With the help of now Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, when she was a member of Congress, who helped shepherd it through. And it all fell apart over qualified immunity and other things. But now the idea that you would get a George Floyd Justice and Policing Act or any kind of police reform through the Congress that is there now is wishful thinking.
Yeah.
I do think that the White House, the president in particular, and certainly Majority Leader Schumer and Minority Leader Jeffries in the House, they are also very well aware of the reality that they face. But I think they also know that they can't not try, that they must do something. That we saw Tyre Nichols. Before Tyre Nichols, there was Walter Scott in South Carolina. There have been many. And so if they give up, even in the face of the impossibility, then they are saying to Americans, they're saying to Black Americans, we don't care. And from all the meetings that I've been to today, from listening to the President of the United States, there's no doubt in my mind that they care and that they want to do something. It's just too bad that folks on the other side of the aisle can't meet them even halfway.
Well, to your point, I mean, on this issue, it's Republicans that hold all the
You
cards.
gotta vote.
Understanding the point you make about
those
the imperative
Black
to not
and
give
brown
up as Democrats
communities
see it.
have
The Democrats risk
to vote.
falsely inflating people's hopes.
We've got to fight
people who care about
gerrymandering.
this issue, that something can get done, when it looks like nothing can get done.
Well, no, I mean, sure, you can blame them if Democrats in their message don't say, we're on board, but the Republicans aren't. You have to talk about the issue and then talk about the impediment to the solution.
Right.
And the impediment to the solution are the Republicans. And so keep hammering away at the topic, at the issue, because unfortunately, there is going to be another Tyre Nichols. We just don't know where, we just don't know when. And it breaks my heart that I even can say that with supreme confidence, but that's where we are.
Yeah,
If
still
we're
trying.
watching now, President.
Okay, so, and that's, I think his point is exactly clear, and that's kind of what I was getting to. Maybe he just kind of, that was another part of my, what I was saying about, Joe, it was great that you talked about the talk, but, right, you've got to talk about why you can't make moves on police reform, right? You've got to call out the Republicans in more ways than just a little thing at the end there about, the partisanship, right? And but I mean, let's be real. I mean, if we look back to what he said about Republicans at the end, it was that we're all good people at the end of the day. And that's just unfortunately not true. Lauren Boebert is not a good person at the end of the day. Matt Gaetz is not a good person at the end of the day. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not a good person at the end of the day. Paul Gosar is not a good person at the end of the day. Kevin McCarthy is not a good person at the end of the day. But I will close on this. Joe Biden has done tremendous work to help the United States lead in the fight against climate change. And I did note that he mentioned being stewards of the land, which I thought was an important line for a president to talk about, because I don't think we've heard presidents talk like that before. And I don't think we've seen a president before bring in the tribal communities like Joe Biden has tried to do. And so there were multiple times where he talked about, tribal lands, and he talked and he used words that you could almost associate with tribes. So I thought that was beautiful. So I'll close on that and I'll end the stream. It's been almost 2 hours. Thank you guys for watching. Joe, thank you for commenting. Harbinger Dragon Man, always good to see you. There were some other great comments on Facebook. I'm streaming over there as well. I know that I'm trying to look for your username. I think it was let's see here. Pankaj? Yeah.
Congress, and also a nod to the fact
Sharma,
that he's going to be spending a lot more time these next year and a half
catch you guys
talking
in the
about
next
what
live
has
stream,
happened as opposed to
or
what
in the
could happen.
videos. Thank you guys
Jonathan Capehart, can we talk
so
about
much again
the new urgency that Democrats are trying to